The gym at Crescent Valley Fitness was a temple of sweat and mirrors, but it had lost its holiness years ago. What had once been a sanctuary for working people, factory workers, nurses, single mothers, had gentrified into something else. The CrossFit crowd had invaded first. Then came the Instagram fitness influencers. Then the tech bros with their personal trainers and their designer workout where that had never seen a real day's work. Karen Chen didn't remember exactly when she'd stopped seeing the gym as a place to improve and started seeing it as a place to dominate. Probably around the same time her marriage fell apart. Or when her company passed her over for a promotion, the second time. Or maybe it was when her 17-year-old daughter told her during a screaming match about grades that she was exhausting to be around. Karen hadn't cried since then. Instead, she'd bought a pre-workout that tasted like battery acid, started going to the gym at 5 a.m., and began treating every interaction like a negotiation she had to win. This Thursday morning, November 14th, at 5:47 a.m., she was in a mood that felt like lightning trapped in a bottle. She'd woken up to a text from her ex, scheduling the lawyer's final meeting. Can you do next Tuesday? No hello, no attempt at civility, just legal machinery grinding forward. The gym would fix it. The gym always fixed everything, at least for an hour. Karen pushed through the glass doors, her reflection superimposed over the empty front desk. She was still wearing her work clothes from yesterday, a cream blouse, tailored black pants. Under her gym bag was slung diagonally across her body. She hadn't bothered changing at home. She'd come straight from working late at the office, where she'd stayed because at least there she was needed. The squat rack area was empty. Good. She wanted the power rack today where she could load up heavy and feel her body respond with simple, uncomplicated force. The idea of squatting 225 pounds appealed to her in a way nothing else did anymore. Pure physics, pure will. Her quads would burn, her breath would rasp, and for 45 minutes her brain would shut up. She dropped her bag on the bench and started pulling off her blouse, revealing the expensive sports bra underneath. Black, minimalist, expensive. She'd spent $300 on it. She spent money the way other people drank. That's when she noticed him. He was at the barbell rack on the opposite side of the gym, and he was old. Not older guy at the gym old. Not Silver Fox old. Genuinely, unmistakably, probably been through a few wars old. His hair was white as cloud cotton. His skin was a map of age spots and weathered sun exposure. He wore a faded Stanford athletics shirt from probably 1995 and gray shorts that hung to his knees. And he was loading the barbell. Karen watched as he moved with surprising confidence, sliding 45-pound plates onto the bar with hands that didn't shake. He had to be 80 at least, maybe older. What was he doing here? This wasn't a senior center aquatics class. This was the power rack. This was for people with something to prove. She tried to ignore him. She loaded her own bar, 2 45s on each side, and settled in for her warm-up set. The weight felt good in her hands. She positioned herself, took a deep breath, and began to squat. That's when she heard him grunt. It wasn't a small sound. It was a real, full-bodied grunt, the sound of someone moving serious weight. Karen's eyes snapped open mid-squat, dangerous, she knew, but she was distracted, and she glanced across the gym. The old man had just finished a set of what looked like deadlifts. He was breathing hard, but he was smiling, genuinely smiling, like he was having fun. Karen finished her set and racked the weight. She stood there, hands on her hips, and watched him. He was organizing his plates, making sure everything was neat, being careful, being methodical in a way that made Karen's jaw clench. Slow, so slow, like he had all the time in the world. She had maybe 45 minutes before she had to shower and get to work. She had a presentation at 9 a.m. She had emails. She had a life that was compressed and squeezed and barely functional. And this man was moving like he had nothing but time. It took her 5 minutes to decide it was annoying. It took her 10 to decide it was unacceptable. On her third set, Karen loaded 275 pounds, not her usual warm-up weight, but heavier because she was angry now and the anger needed somewhere to go. She positioned herself at the squat rack and began her descent. Down, 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 her knees tracked perfectly, her back didn't round. Years of CrossFit and private training had made her strong. She was fit. She was disciplined. That's when the old man walked up to the rack next to hers. Not the empty one on the other side, not the one that was obviously available. The one immediately adjacent, separated by maybe 4 feet and a set of mirrors. He began loading his bar with the same methodical confidence he'd shown before. Karen watched him in the mirror, still suspended at the bottom of her squat. Her legs were beginning to burn. "These racks are typically set up so people aren't right next to each other," she said, still in the squat position, her voice tight. "It's a safety issue." The old man paused. He looked at her, really looked at her, with eyes that were a sharp, clear blue. The kind of blue you see in very old people who have spent a lifetime in the sun. "I wasn't aware of a rule," he said. His voice was calm, warm, even. "There were 2 others empty. Would you prefer I use one of those?" "I prefer to use the gym without it feeling crowded," Karen said, and finally completed her squat, standing up with the 275 pounds across her shoulders. She racked it. Her hands were shaking slightly from the weight, she told herself, not from anger. "I can move," the old man said, and he honestly sounded like he meant it. Like inconveniencing himself wasn't actually an inconvenience to him, like he didn't experience the world as a series of challenges to be won. "No," Karen said too quickly. "You're here, whatever." But she'd already decided she hated him. It wasn't logical. She knew that, even in the moment. There was nothing inherently offensive about an 80-year-old man trying to stay fit. In fact, it was probably admirable. She could see other people in the gym glancing over with that kind of gentle respect people reserve for their grandparents trying new technology. But Karen didn't feel respect. She felt something else. Displaced anger, probably. The kind of emotional residue that accumulates when you can't express what you're actually upset about, so you find a nearby target. She loaded 315 pounds onto her bar, her max usually for singles. She'd never attempted it this early in a session. It was reckless. It was stupid. It was exactly what she wanted to do. The old man was loading his bar now, 1 plate at a time. He'd loaded 445s so far, 180 pounds of weight on an empty bar. That's 225 total. Karen found she was watching him instead of focusing on her own set. How old even was this guy? How long could he even have been training to maintain something like that? You didn't just keep this level of fitness at 80. You worked for it. Year after year, decade after decade. Why did that make her angrier? She positioned herself at the bar loaded with 315 pounds. She took a breath. She began to descend. And that's when the old man racked his bar. 2 sets of plates, so 315 pounds exactly. The exact moment she was at the bottom of her squat. The timing was coincidental, meaningless. But Karen, with her knees at 90 degrees and her back perfectly perpendicular to the ground, suspended in effort and vulnerability, felt it as a challenge. She exploded up. Her legs drove through the floor with fury. The weight came up faster than usual, angrier. She locked out at the top, breathing hard. The old man was already in his squat, moving with a control that made her feel like she'd just yanked the bar upward like some kind of CrossFit maniac. Her 3rd rep was shaky. Her 4th she failed to complete, not catastrophically, but noticeably. She racked the weight and stood there, breathing hard, sweating, humiliated. The old man completed his final rep and racked the weight with a quiet click of metal. He stepped back, breathing harder than before, but moving with the same calm confidence. "Nice effort," he said to her, not unkindly. "Good form on most of those." Karen's head snapped up. "I didn't ask for feedback." "No," he agreed. "You didn't, I'm sorry." And the fact that he apologized, genuinely without defensiveness, made it so much worse. "I wasn't struggling," she said. "That was a high-rep set. I was going for volume." Of course, the old man said. He had intelligent eyes. Eyes that had read books and raised children and seen things. Eyes that suggested he understood, probably, that she was lying. "What's your name?" she demanded. He seemed surprised by the question. Frank Morrison." "Well, Frank, this isn't a conversation. We're both just using the gym." "Agreed," he said. "I'll get out of your way." He moved to the empty rack, the one on the other side of the gym, and began the process of loading his plates there. He moved slow. So goddamn slow. His back bent carefully with each plate, his knees bent to protect his spine. Everything about him screamed fragility disguised as strength. Karen did something she'd never done before. She loaded the bar with 365 pounds. 15 pounds above her max. She'd never even attempted it. It was stupid. It was dangerous. She positioned herself, she took a deep breath, and she began to squat. The weight was crushing. Too much. She could feel it in her core, in her stabilizer muscles, in the subtle ways her body was trying to compensate for load it wasn't designed to handle yet. She got to the bottom of the squat, barely, and found she couldn't get back up. For one long moment of pure panic, she was stuck, pinned under 365 pounds of steel, suspended at the bottom of a squat, her legs screaming. A hand appeared in her peripheral vision. Frank had moved without her hearing him. He was standing at the side of the rack, his weathered hand on the bar, ready to spot her, to take the weight if she failed. She didn't want his help. She wanted to die under this bar rather than accept it. But her body had other opinions. Karen exploded upward with everything she had. It was sloppy. Her form fell apart, her back rounded, her knees drifted inward. She looked in that moment exactly like what she was, someone trying to prove something instead of actually training. But she got the weight up. The bar cleared the rack. She racked it with a desperate clang and stood there, drenched in sweat that wasn't just from exertion. Frank had withdrawn his hand. He was standing at a respectful distance, giving her space. "I had that," Karen said, though they both knew it wasn't true. "I know," Frank said, and the kindness in his voice was somehow the cruelest thing of all. Karen didn't go back to the squat rack. She moved to the cable machine and did leg extensions, machine work, easy work, safe work, while Frank finished his session at the far rack. She watched him in the mirrors. He was doing farmer's carries at the end, walking the length of the gym with heavy dumbbells in each hand, his posture perfect, his breathing steady. When he was done, he put away his weights, every single one in the correct spot, no slamming, no carelessness. He wiped down the rack with a towel he pulled from his gym bag. Then he walked to the desk, probably to check out, and Karen saw him exchange a few words with Marcus, the morning shift attendant, and they both laughed. Frank Morrison gathered his things, a small water bottle, a towel, a worn gym bag that probably cost $30 when it was new, and walked out into the pre-dawn darkness. Karen stood at the leg extension machine, her hands gripping the handles so hard her knuckles went white, and felt something shift inside her. She didn't yet understand what it was. She wouldn't, not for days, but it was the moment everything began to change. The moment that an 80-year-old man named Frank Morrison, who asked for nothing and expected less, became the mirror in which Karen Chen finally saw herself. She told herself it didn't matter, that she came to the gym for herself, not to see some random old man prove his relevance, that his absence was actually better, more space, fewer distractions, less reason to waste mental energy on a stranger. She was lying, and she knew it. On Friday morning, she woke at 4:30 a.m. before her alarm, and the first thought that crossed her mind was, will he be there? She wasn't, not on Friday. Not on Saturday when Karen violated her usual routine and went at 6 a.m. instead of her sacred 5:45 slot. Not on Sunday, which felt like a betrayal. She never went on Sunday, but there she was at 8 a.m. in athletic wear, pretending she was just getting her steps in, rather than looking for a man she'd been hostile to for 5 minutes. By Monday morning, she was furious. At Frank, presumably, for some transgression she couldn't quite name. At herself for caring. At the universe for the general injustice of existing. She was still in this mood when Frank walked through the doors at 5:48 a.m., exactly where he'd been the first time, in his faded Stanford shirt and his decade-old shorts. He didn't see her immediately. He checked in with Marcus, said something that made the kids smile, and then made his way to the free weights section. He was moving slower today, Karen noticed. His gait was slightly off. He was favoring his left side. It gave her a grim sense of satisfaction. Of course, he was old. The laws of physics applied to everyone eventually. But then he loaded the squat rack, lighter than before, 275 pounds, and moved through his set with the same methodical grace. And when he was done, he did something he hadn't done the first time. He spent 20 minutes doing mobility work, stretching, rolling his hips, doing these strange, controlled movements that looked like physical therapy. Karen, from her position at the leg press machine, watched him with the intensity of someone studying a rival's weaknesses before a fight. He's just going through the motions, she thought, trying to maintain. It's not real strength, it's maintenance. There's a difference. But even as the thought formed, she knew it was bullshit. The way he moved suggested something else entirely, not desperate maintenance, but genuine care. He was training like someone who understood that the body was a garden that needed tending, not a machine that needed conquering. On Tuesday, Corinne arrived at 5:42 and positioned herself at the bench press station. She loaded 185 pounds, respectable, not a max, and began doing sets. When Frank arrived and settled into the dumbbell area, she found her timing shifting. She'd rest a little longer so he was lifting while she wasn't. She'd accelerate her sets so they overlapped. Why, she couldn't have explained it. Some part of her brain wanted to be near him, wanted to observe him, wanted to know. By Wednesday, she'd evolved it into strategy. "You train here often?" she asked, approaching him as he was setting up his workout for the day. They were approaching each other at the water cooler, and Corinne had engineered the timing so they'd cross paths. Frank looked up, seeming to place her immediately. "Most mornings," he said. "You're here regularly, too." "I come when I can make it," she said, "before work." "That takes discipline," he said, and there was nothing patronizing about it. It was simple fact. "It's necessary," Corinne said, "for mental health, for fitness, for not completely losing my mind." The last part came out more honest than she'd intended. Frank nodded like this made complete sense, like he understood that the gym could be a refuge from the world that was trying to dismantle you. "It's a good way to start the day," he said. "Clears the head." "How long have you been training?" Corinne asked. Frank smiled. "That's a funny question. I've been training in some form or another for about 60 years. 60 years, she did the math. He'd started when he was 20. He'd been lifting while she was being born, while her parents were starting their family, while she was in high school, thinking fitness was something you did in high school before life got real. "That's a long time," she said. "It's a privilege," he replied. "To have the health to train that long, I don't take it for granted." Corinne wanted to ask more, but a woman came up looking for a squat rack, and the moment dissolved. Frank politely excused himself and moved to set up his first movement. But Corinne stood by the water cooler for a long moment, turning over his words. "A privilege, a privilege." She went home that morning and, for the first time in weeks, actually looked at herself. Not at her body, the muscles, the definition, the visible abs she'd worked so hard to achieve, but at her face, at the tension in her jaw, at the tight lines around her eyes, at the expression of someone carrying something too heavy and refusing to set it down. By Friday, she'd moved on to what she told herself was stage 3, research. Corinne did what any emotionally stunted person in the 21st century does when they're obsessed with someone they don't understand. She started investigating. Crescent Valley Fitness had a sign-in sheet for members. It was supposed to be for emergencies and liability purposes, but Corinne knew the names of probably 30 people from glancing at it while getting her guest pass one time. Frank wouldn't be hard to find. She didn't actually look. The thought felt invasive. Instead, she did something more acceptable. She asked Marcus casually, the way you might ask about any regular member. "Frank, the old dude? Yeah, man, he's cool. Comes in like clockwork. His daughter actually got him a membership for his 80th birthday like 4 years ago. I think he's been here almost every day since." 80th birthday, 4 years ago. So he was 84 years old and moving with more vitality than most 40-year-olds Corinne knew. "Does he ever train with someone?" she asked, keeping her voice light. "A trainer or something?" Marcus laughed. "Nah, he just does his thing. He's like the most self-sufficient person I've ever met. Only time he talks to anyone is like asking where something is or complimenting someone's workout. Guy's got good energy, though. You don't see people his age with that kind of, I dunno, peace maybe." Peace. Corinne went home and sat on her couch for 2 hours without turning on the television. By the following Monday, she'd evolved her strategy again. She showed up at 5:45 on the dot when she used to come and positioned herself at the leg press machine directly across from the squat rack. She could see Frank's entire workout without appearing to be watching. She could analyze his form, his rest periods, his selection of exercises. Frank was running a simple program. Squats, some kind of pulling exercise, some kind of pressing exercise, and always some kind of mobility work at the end. Nothing fancy. Nothing from the Instagram fitness world. Just the fundamentals, executed with the precision of someone who'd been doing them for 6 decades. By Wednesday of that week, she'd noticed something else. Frank was getting stronger. Not dramatically, but the 275-pound squats that had been slightly labored the first time she saw him were now moving smoother. His form had improved marginally. She could see the correction in his descent. the way he was using his cues better. This angered her for reasons she couldn't articulate. It was Thursday, November 21st, exactly 1 week and 1 day since that first interaction, when everything came to a head. Karen arrived at her usual time and immediately sensed that the energy of the gym was different, more crowded. It was morning, but not early enough in the morning. There must have been an extra class or something. The facility was packed with people she didn't recognize, younger kids, people in matching athletic wear like it was a group thing. Frank was already there, of course, at the squat rack, and he was loading the bar with the same 315 pounds that had started this whole obsession. Karen's heart rate elevated. She told herself it was just the crowded gym, the disruption to routine. Definitely not the sight of Frank preparing to do the exact thing that had triggered her meltdown 1 week prior. She positioned herself at the leg press machine, the same spot she'd been using all week, and watched. Frank moved through his warm-up sets, 135, 185, 225. Each was smooth, controlled, efficient. Then he loaded the 315. The gym had quieted slightly. Word travels fast in a gym, even a gentrified, Instagram-famous, overpriced one like Crescent Valley. Word travels that there's an 84-year-old man about to squat 315 pounds. Frank took a breath, he positioned himself, and he descended into the squat. For one moment, just one, Karen saw him do something she'd never seen him do before. He struggled. His knees started to drift inward slightly. His back started to round just a millimeter. His body was asking, "Are we sure we want to do this?" And then, with what looked like a decision made in his entire being, not just his muscles, but something deeper, Frank corrected. His knees came back in line, his back straightened, his chest came up, and he drove through the squat with the kind of power that comes not from youth, but from decades of knowing exactly how to move your body. He locked out at the top, he took a breath, he racked the weight. The gym actually burst into applause. Not ironic applause, not the kind of thing fitness people do when they're being condescending about someone's effort. Real applause. The kind that comes when you see someone do something genuinely impressive. Frank actually blushed. He waved his hand like it was no big deal and moved to the dumbbells for his next exercise. Karen's hands were shaking as she gripped the leg press machine. Something had shifted in her chest, something that felt uncomfortably close to admiration, to shame, to the terrifying realization that this man, this stranger, had somehow become the most important thing in her increasingly dysfunctional worldview. She needed to do something about it. She needed to establish dominance. She needed to prove something. She loaded the leg press with 495 pounds, a weight she'd never moved before. She'd done 475 for a single, but this was untested territory. Stupid territory. She positioned herself, she took a breath. And that's when Frank finished his session and walked past her. He glanced at the weight loaded on the machine. He glanced at her face, and she saw something flicker across his expression, not judgment but recognition. He knew what she was about to do and why. He knew it was for him in a way, that this was an answer to something. He paused, he opened his mouth, and then he seemed to decide that anything he said would be wrong. He simply nodded, respectfully, not condescendingly, and continued on to finish his cool-down. Karen pushed the 495 pounds. For a moment, just a moment, nothing happened. Then the machine moved, her legs drove, the weight moved up, up, up. She got it to full extension and held it for a beat. Then the weight started coming down, and she couldn't control it. It descended fast, too fast. Karen's knees buckled under the load. The machine bottomed out hard, and Karen slid back in the seat with an impact that knocked the wind from her lungs. For a split second, she couldn't breathe. For a split second, she genuinely thought she might have broken something. Then air came back. Pain bloomed in her right knee and her lower back. She sat there, gasping, aware that most of the gym had turned to look at her. Frank was there in 2 seconds, his hand on her shoulder. "Are you okay?" His voice was steady, concerned but not panicked. "I'm fine," Karen gasped. "I'm fine." She wasn't fine. She could feel her knee already starting to swell. Her back was screaming. She'd done something, not career-ending maybe, but something. "Don't move," Frank said. "Not yet, just breathe." And Karen who didn't accept help, Karen who didn't cry, Karen who'd been holding tension in her shoulders since 2019, found herself actually listening to him. She breathed in through her nose, out through her mouth. "Can you feel everything?" Frank asked. "Yes," Corinne said. "Move your right foot, just the ankle." She moved it. "Other foot." She moved it. "Okay," Frank said. "I think you're okay, but you need to see a doctor. That was a hard impact." Marcus was already there with ice and a water bottle. Other people were asking if she needed an ambulance. Corinne found herself looking at Frank, and in his ancient blue eyes, she saw something that made her want to cry. He wasn't angry. He wasn't judging. He looked at her the way you might look at someone drowning, with the simple clarity of someone who wants to help. "I'm sorry," Corinne said quietly. "About last week, about being hostile, about all of it." Frank smiled. It was sad somehow. "You don't owe me an apology," he said, "but I accept it." "I pushed 495, she said in a voice that sounded small. "I've never done that before." "I know," Frank said. "I'm sorry it didn't work out." And the fact that he didn't say, "I told you so." The fact that he didn't say that was foolish. The fact that he simply sat with her as Marcus called a nurse hotline and they waited for answers, that broke something in her. Corinne Chen, in the middle of Crescent Valley Fitness Gym, with an ice pack on her knee and tears finally starting to fall, began to understand that strength and weakness were not what she'd thought they were. That an 84-year-old man had been trying to teach her something since the first moment she'd spoken to him. And that she might have just destroyed her knee before she could actually learn the lesson. The diagnosis was grade 2 MCL strain with mild patellar tracking issues. Painful, annoying, but not career-ending or permanently disabling. Physical therapy, rest, no heavy weight bearing for at least 6 weeks. The words felt like a prison sentence. Corinne sat in Dr. Patel's office at Riverside Urgent Care, wearing the same clothes she'd worn to the gym, because there hadn't been time to go home before the appointment, and listened to instructions about icing and elevation and the specific stretches she should do 3 times a day. "No jumping," Dr. Patel said. "No running, gentle walking, swimming if you have access to a pool. We want to let the ligament heal properly. If you don't, you'll be susceptible to re-injury, possibly worse." Corinne nodded, not really hearing. "You're active?" Dr. Patel asked, glancing up from her chart. "I go to the gym," Corinne said. "You'll need to modify significantly," Dr. Patel said kindly. "For at least 6 weeks, upper body work is fine, core work is fine, but your lower body is off limits." 6 weeks of the gym being a place where she couldn't do what she actually wanted to do. 6 weeks of watching other people do what she couldn't. 6 weeks of existing in her own personal hell. "Okay," Corinne said. When she got home, she took a hot shower and stood in front of the mirror in her bathroom, examining her reflection. The bruising had already started to show, a purple smudge across her right knee. Her left knee, the one that had been bearing too much weight, was also starting to discolor. She looked defeated, broken, weak. The thought came with a spike of self-hatred, so acute it felt physical. She did what she always did when she didn't know how to process her emotions. She worked. She sent emails. She reviewed the presentation for the 9 a.m. meeting she'd missed on Monday. She did expense reports. She scheduled calls. Her ex texted, "Still coming to the lawyer meeting Tuesday." She didn't respond. By Saturday, Corinne had convinced herself that she could somehow manage, that she'd just go to the gym and do upper body work, that not lifting would be quitting, and she didn't quit. She'd never been the kind of person to quit, except she'd quit her marriage. She'd quit trying to connect with her daughter. She'd quit believing that anything could be different or better. But the gym she wouldn't quit. She arrived at Crescent Valley at 5:48 a.m., moving slowly with a slight limp that made her want to scream. She changed into workout clothes and made her way to the bench press station. Frank wasn't there yet. She was halfway through her first set when he arrived. She watched his face in the mirror as he noticed her, watched as he assessed her limping gait, watched as he seemed to reach some kind of decision. He didn't approach her immediately. He went through his normal warm-up, and then, when Corinne was resting between sets, he came over. "How's your knee?" he asked. "Grade 2 MCL strain," Corinne said flatly. 6 weeks off lower body." "That's painful," Frank said. "I'm sorry." "I'm fine," Corinne said automatically. Frank smiled sadly. "Are you, though?" Corinne looked at him, and something in her, Some defense mechanism she'd been running since childhood simply collapsed. "No," she said. "I'm not fine. I'm not fine, and I haven't been fine in so long I don't remember what fine feels like. My marriage is ending. My daughter won't talk to me. My job feels pointless. And I come to this gym at 5:45 a.m. every morning because it's the only place where I feel like I have any control, and now I can't even do that." She'd said it all without looking at him. She was staring at the bench press bar like it had insulted her. Frank didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was quiet but steady. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. Karen nodded. "I've been coming here for 4 years, Frank said. Almost every day. You know how many people have actually tried to have a conversation with me?" She didn't answer. "Two," Frank said. "Marcus and one woman who asked me where the water fountain was. Everyone else just sees an old man and assumes they know everything about him, that he's working out because his doctor told him to, that he's doing maintenance, that he's not serious about it because he's not trying to be bigger or stronger in the way young people are." Karen finally looked at him. "I came here because my wife died 4 years ago," Frank continued, "and I didn't want to die too, not right away. She was the center of my life, and when she was gone, I didn't know who I was without her. I was 80 years old, and I suddenly had this question I'd never asked myself: who am I actually?" He paused, and there was something in his face that made Karen think he was seeing something from a long time ago. "The gym became where I answered that question," he said. "Every single day, not because I was trying to prove anything or win anything, but because it was somewhere I could be present, somewhere I could listen to my body and respect what it was doing, somewhere I could be both strong and humble at the same time." Karen felt tears gathering in her eyes again, which made her angry. "So what?" she said, a bit harshly. "You're saying I should just accept this and find peace with my failing knee and my failing marriage and my failing daughter?" "No," Frank said calmly. "I'm saying that maybe you're approaching this wrong. Maybe this injury isn't punishment. Maybe it's an invitation." "An invitation to what?" Karen asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "To ask yourself some of the questions you've been avoiding," Frank said. "Why are you really here? What are you actually trying to prove? Who do you want to be?" Karen stood up abruptly, which sent a spike of pain through her knee. She winced, tried not to show it, and failed. "I don't need a therapist," she said. "I need to get back to my workout." "Okay," Frank said. "I'll leave you to it." But before he walked away, he did something that landed differently than anything else. He looked at her with such profound kindness that it was almost unbearable. "Your daughter loves you, you know," he said. "Even if you can't see it right now, they always do." Karen didn't respond, couldn't respond. Frank nodded once and moved away to start his own workout. That's when Karen realized he has a daughter. Of course he did. He'd mentioned it when explaining the gym membership, but she'd never asked about her, never asked about his wife, who was apparently gone. Never asked him anything actually personal because it hadn't occurred to her that he was a person with a full life and a history and people he loved and loss he'd carried. She'd just seen an obstacle to overcome. Monday morning came and Karen's knee was better, not healed but functional. The bruising was fading to yellow and green. She could walk without a significant limp, though the joint still ached. She arrived at the gym at the usual time and positioned herself at the cable station where she could do core work. Frank was in his usual spot, working through his warm-up sets. Today, he was wearing a different shirt. Not the Stanford one, but a faded blue polo with a small emblem Karen didn't recognize. She watched, and after about 15 minutes, when Frank was resting between sets, she walked over. "I'm sorry," she said, "for dismissing what you said, for being angry at you." Frank looked up. "You don't owe me an apology." "I do," Karen said, "because you were trying to help me and I treated you like an opponent." "People do that sometimes," Frank said. "It's usually because they're frightened." "Of what?" Karen asked. "Of not being strong," Frank said. "Of being vulnerable, of admitting that strength isn't the same thing as health." Karen sat on the bench next to him. It wasn't really appropriate. He was in the middle of a workout, but Frank didn't seem to mind. "Tell me about your wife," Karen said. Frank smiled. "That's a big ask from someone I met a week ago." "I know," Karen said, "but I want to know, I want to understand how you. I don't know. How you get to 84 and you're still here, still training, still calm when everything seems to fall apart." Frank was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Her name was Margaret Ellis Morrison. We were married 57 years. She was a painter, terrible at it, actually wildly untalented, but she loved it, and a gardener, talented at that, and the best person I've ever known. She had this way of making people feel seen, really seen, not like she was evaluating them, just like she was genuinely interested in their existence." "What happened?" Corinne asked. "Answer," Frank said simply. "5-year battle. She was 67. It happened 4 years ago. We had 2 years together after her diagnosis before she died, and in those 2 years she asked me to do something. She asked me to promise that I wouldn't fall apart when she was gone, that I wouldn't use her death as an excuse to stop living, that I would keep moving forward, not because she wanted me to be happy, though she did, but because I owed it to myself to find out who I could be without her." He paused, and when he continued, his voice was softer. "So I did. I joined this gym. I started to learn how to exist as just Frank Morrison, not Frank and Margaret. And it turns out that Frank Morrison, all by himself, is a person who appreciates movement, who understands that the body is a miracle worth respecting, who can feel strong without needing to prove it to anyone." Corinne found that her cheeks were wet. "I don't think I can do that," she said. "I don't think I can just let things be what they are." "You might be surprised," Frank said. "It usually takes a broke knee to get someone to stop and listen to themselves, so maybe this is good timing." Over the next week, Corinne began to change her gym routine, not because she had to, but because something inside her shifted. She still showed up at 5:45 a.m., but instead of jumping immediately into the most intense thing she could do, she started with light stretching. She started paying attention to how her body actually felt, not just whether it could move weight. And she started watching Frank, not as a competitor or a challenge, but as a person doing something she was beginning to understand, moving through the world with intention. By Thursday of the second week after her injury, she found herself doing something she hadn't done in years. She called her daughter. "Hey, Mom," her daughter said, surprise evident. "Everything okay?" "I injured my knee," Corinne said, "at the gym." "Oh my God, are you okay?" her daughter asked, and in that voice was evidence of what Frank had told her. Love. Genuine, underneath everything love, even after all the times Corinne had been absent or sharp or exhausting. "I'm okay," Corinne said, "but I had to stop and do physical therapy and rethink how I approach things. And I realized I've been doing the same thing with you, approaching everything like I have to win, like I have to be strong and right and in control. And I'm sorry." Her daughter was quiet for a moment. "Mom, I'm sorry too," she finally said. "I've been difficult, I know I have." "You haven't," Corinne said. "You've been 17, I've been not good, but I'm trying to be different." They talked for 40 minutes. Not everything was resolved. Relationships that have broken need real time to heal, but something moved. Something opened. Corinne found herself telling her daughter about Frank, about the gym, about the realization that control was a cage, not a house. By the third week, Corinne could walk normally again, though the gym doctor had cleared her to begin very light lower body work. Nothing heavy, nothing explosive, just gentle movement to begin retraining the stabilizer muscles. Frank watched her do her first set of the new exercises, lightweight squats, maybe 135 pounds, and when she was done, he nodded. "Good form," he said. "Not heavy," she replied. "Doesn't need to be," he said. "You're listening to your body, that's what matters." Corinne smiled. She was beginning to understand. But the real test came on the fourth Thursday after her injury, during a moment that would crystallize everything that was happening inside her. She was doing her warm-up, just walking on the inclined treadmill to loosen up her knee, when one of the influencer types came in. The guy was maybe 25, absolutely shredded, the kind of person who spent as much time taking selfies in the mirror as he did actually training. He loaded the squat rack with 455 pounds, heavy, more than Corinne had ever done, and proceeded to quarter squat the weight, not even getting to parallel, just bouncing in the top half of the movement, clearly more interested in the visual of heavy weight than actual strength. The old Corinne, the Corinne from 4 weeks ago, would have watched him with disgust, would have judged him for ego lifting, would have felt superior because she knew better form. The new Corinne, the Corinne still being born, saw something different. She saw a young person who, like her, was trying to prove something, who was afraid, who was using the weight as a shield. She didn't judge him, she just recognized him. That recognition, Corinne would later realize, was the moment she actually started healing. 5 weeks into Corinne's recovery, she was able to return to moderately heavy lower body work. Dr. Patel had cleared her for essentially full activity, with the caveat that she should listen to her body and avoid the kind of reckless loading that had created the problem in the first place. The irony, Corinne thought, was that now she wanted to listen to her body. The whole point had changed. It was a Tuesday morning, and the gym was moderately busy. Corinne was working through her warm-up sets for squats, just light work, 185 pounds, movement-focused, when she noticed Frank was having a more intense session than usual. He had loaded 345 pounds onto the squat rack, nearly his body weight. She'd never seen him go that heavy before. He was moving carefully, deliberately, treating each rep like it mattered. After his set, he racked the weight and stood there, breathing, looking like he was having a conversation with himself about whether he was actually done. "That looked heavy," Corinne said, walking over once he'd had a moment to recover. "It is," Frank admitted. "I'm testing something." "Testing what?" Corinne asked. Frank turned to her, and there was something different about him today. A quietness that suggested something significant was happening. "My daughter is getting married," he said. "In 3 weeks, they want me to dance at the reception." "That's wonderful," Corinne said. "It would be," Frank said, "if I could dance, and I want to be strong enough that I don't worry about falling, that I can be present with her without being frightened of my own body." Corinne felt something crack open inside her chest. "So you're building strength," she said. "For her," Frank confirmed, "and for myself, because I want to remember this moment clearly. I want to be fully here for it." It was, Corinne would later realize, the most perfectly illustrated version of what strength actually meant. Not dominance, not victory, not proving something to strangers at the gym. Strength was the ability to be fully present for the people you loved. Over the next week, something shifted in Corinne's understanding of Frank. She began to see all the small ways he was preparing, not just training, but actually preparing his entire self for this event. He added more mobility work to his routine, more stretching. He started eating differently, bringing lunch containers to the gym that contained vegetables and lean protein. He reduced his volume and increased his intensity on specific movements, squats mostly, and some upper body pressing, the ones he'd need for standing and dancing. And every morning, he moved through his routine with clear intention. On Friday of that week, Marcus was working the front desk when Corinne checked in, and she asked casually, "Frank's daughter getting married?" Marcus looked up surprised. "Yeah, how'd you know that?" "He mentioned it," Corinne said. "That's cool," Marcus said. "He's been different for the past couple weeks, like more focused, but in a happy way. Usually people get focused because they're angry about something. He's focused because he's excited." The distinction stuck with Corinne. Anger and excitement could look the same on the outside: intensity, commitment, discipline. But the origin was completely different, and that changed everything about the experience. Monday morning came, and Corinne showed up to find Frank in the middle of a conversation with someone she didn't recognize. The woman was older than Corinne, maybe early 60s, with Frank's same blue eyes and an expression of deep warmth. This had to be his daughter. The two of them were laughing about something, and Frank had his arm around her shoulders in a way that suggested easy comfort. When his daughter left, after giving him a hug that made Frank's face light up in a way Corinne had never seen, Corinne walked over. "That was your daughter," she said. "That was," Frank confirmed. "Rebecca. She had some questions about the wedding and wanted to make sure I was doing okay. She worries that I'm lonely." "Are you?" Corinne asked. Frank considered this seriously. "Not anymore," he said. "I was, after Margaret died, but this gym became something like a community for me. I see the same people. I know their names. I know that there's a young woman with a knee injury who's learning to be kind to herself. That matters. That's not lonely." Corinne felt her chest tighten. "I've been thinking," Frank said, "about what you said that day, about your daughter. Have you had more conversations with her?" "We've talked a few times," Corinne said. "It's still weird, still awkward, but it's something." "That's everything," Frank said. "Most relationships are fixed in increments. One conversation, one small gesture, one moment where you decide that the other person's well-being matters more than your pride. That's how you build something real." "Is that how it was with your wife?" Corinne asked. Frank smiled. Every single day for 57 years, we had fights, misunderstandings, times when we had no idea how to reach each other, but we kept choosing each other. And that choosing, that practice, it wore away the rough parts, slowly, gently. Karen was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Can I ask you something that's probably weird?" "Go ahead," Frank said. "Why did you let me be hostile to you?" Karen asked. "That first day, I was awful. I was territorial and rude and dismissive. Why didn't you just move to another rack and forget I existed?" Frank took a breath. "Because I recognized something in you," he said. "I recognized myself. About 40 years ago, I was you. I was angry at the world. I was using my job and my body and my accomplishments as proof that I was worth something. And I was exhausting to everyone around me, Margaret especially. It took her dying for me to understand what I'd been doing." He paused. "But she had to die for me to learn," he continued. "So when I saw you, someone doing the same thing to themselves, I thought maybe I could offer something different. Maybe I could show you that strength doesn't require proof, that you can be powerful and humble at the same time, that letting someone help you isn't weakness." "I almost broke you," Karen said, "trying to lift more than I could handle." "Yes," Frank said, "you did, and I was okay. Because I understand that when people are struggling, sometimes they lash out. Sometimes they choose pain instead of growth because at least pain feels like something. At least it feels real." Karen started to cry then, not quietly, not the restrained tears of before, full crying, the kind where your whole body gets involved. Frank didn't try to comfort her, he just sat with her. He put a hand on her back and let her have the grief. Because that's what it was, Karen realized. Grief. Grief for all the years she'd spent angry. Grief for the relationship with her daughter she'd almost destroyed. Grief for the person she'd been and all the small moments she'd wasted on pride. "Can I tell you something?" Karen said once she'd cried herself out. "Of course," Frank said. "I called my daughter yesterday," Karen said, "and I didn't tell her what to do. I didn't criticize her choices. I just asked about her day. And she told me. She actually opened up and told me about something she was worried about, and I just listened. It was the first time in maybe 2 years that I actually listened to her instead of thinking about what I wanted to say." "How did it feel?" Frank asked. "Like magic," Karen said. "Like I was finally doing something right." "That's what it's supposed to feel like," Frank said. "Everything else is just noise." The next Tuesday was December 10th, and Karen arrived at the gym to find it notably more crowded than usual. There were new people she'd never seen before, younger kids, some older folks. The energy was different. It took her a moment to realize this was Frank's gym family, people he'd interacted with over 4 years, people who'd probably heard he was getting ready for something significant. Marcus called her over at the front desk. "Hey, so Frank wanted to know if you could help him with something today. He's doing a special session for his daughter's wedding dance. He wants some people to watch, just kind of witness it, you know, to make it feel real." Karen's eyes widened. "He wants me there." "He asked specifically for you," Marcus confirmed. When Karen got to the squat rack area, Frank was already there, warming up. But he wasn't warming up for a normal session. He was doing mobility work that looked almost like dancing. Hip circles, leg lifts, core work where he was clearly practicing balance and control. "You're here," Frank said, seeing her. "Marcus said you wanted me to be," Karen said. "I did," Frank said. "Because in a weird way, this is partly because of you. Because I met someone who was so desperate to be strong, and watching that desperation, I realized how grateful I am that I've learned to be strong in a different way." Then Frank did something remarkable. He loaded the barbell with 405 pounds, more weight than he'd ever done before, and he moved through a set of slow, controlled squats. Not bouncing, not rushing. 5 perfect, powerful reps with a weight that most 84-year-olds wouldn't even contemplate. When he racked it, the gym, all these people who'd been quiet, just watching, burst into applause again. And Frank stood there, breathing not triumphant, just peaceful, just present, just grateful. Later, sitting on the bench next to him, Karen said, "That was incredible." "That's what strength actually looks like," Frank replied. "Not proving something, not dominating, just moving your body with intention, just honoring what your body can do." "I understand now," Karen said. "I think I'm beginning to." "Good," Frank said, "because I want to invite you to the wedding. Rebecca would love to meet you. I've told her about you." "You have?" Karen asked, surprised. I've told her about the woman who came into my life angry and sad and scared, Frank said, and who's slowly learning that those things don't have to define her forever. I think she'd like to know you. Corinne smiled. I would like to go, she said. Over the next 3 weeks, as the wedding approached, Corinne found herself becoming part of Frank's world in ways she couldn't have predicted. She helped him find a suit that would allow him to move freely. She practiced dancing with him, badly, laughing at herself, Frank patient and amused. She became something unexpected, a friend. And on December 30th, Corinne stood in the back of Morrison Hall in a dress she'd bought because it made her happy, not because she thought it made her look impressive, and watched as Frank, dressed in a navy suit that fit perfectly, took his daughter's hand and danced with her. He moved slowly, deliberately, each step considered. He wasn't trying to be fancy or impressive. He was just present. He was just a father who loved his daughter, and he was using his strong body to hold her and guide her, and he was there, fully there in the moment. Corinne cried, happy tears, the kind that come when you witness something genuine and true. Afterward, Rebecca found her. "You're the gym friend," Rebecca said, smiling. "Dad wouldn't stop talking about you, how you hurt your knee and had to learn about pride and strength." "He's a good man," Corinne said. "He kind of saved my life." "He saved mine," Rebecca said. "After my mom died, I thought he was going to disappear. I thought I was going to lose him too. But he found that gym and he found his way back. And now I'm watching him help someone else find their way. That's exactly what my mom would have wanted." "She sounds like she was special," Corinne said. "She was," Rebecca confirmed. "And he's carrying on her legacy, just by being here, just by caring about people." Corinne drove home that night and for the first time in years called her daughter without having an agenda. Without a reason. Just to say, "I love you. I'm proud of you. I'm sorry for the ways I've been distant." Her daughter cried on the phone. They both did. And Corinne realized that this was the kind of strength Frank had been trying to teach her all along, the vulnerability to admit you were wrong, the power to show up and keep showing up, the discipline to choose love instead of control. January came with its usual promises and contradictions. New year, new you, get in shape, transform yourself, change everything. Corinne deleted her Instagram account on January 2nd. She didn't do it impulsively. She'd been sitting with the decision for weeks. Every time she opened the app, she saw fitness influencers, life transformation videos, people with perfect abs and perfect lives selling the idea that if you could just achieve this body, this look, this aesthetic, then everything would be fine. The truth, Corinne now understood, was that her knee was healed. Her body was strong. She could squat and deadlift and push with power again. And none of that mattered because the real weakness had never been in her muscles. So she deleted it, and the relief was immediate and profound. At the gym, nothing changed on the surface. Corinne still showed up at 5:45 a.m., still trained hard, still pushed her body, but the reason had shifted. She was no longer training to prove something to the world. She was training because her body was a miracle and she wanted to honor it, because movement made her feel alive, because showing up to the gym, to her life, to her relationships, was the only thing that actually mattered. Frank noticed the shift immediately. "You're different," he said one morning, about 3 weeks into January. "Different how?" Corinne asked. "Lighter," Frank said. "You're still strong, but you're not carrying that thing anymore, that weight that's separate from your body weight." Corinne smiled. "I quit social media," she said. "I realized I was training for an audience that mostly doesn't care, so I just stopped. Now I'm training for me." "That's everything," Frank said. "That's the whole point." By the end of January, Corinne had made a commitment. She was going to do couples counseling with her ex-husband. Not to save the marriage, that ship had sailed, but to understand what had gone wrong and how they could co-parent their daughter without destructing both of their lives. Her ex was surprised when she suggested it. "Corinne, we're past that," he'd said. "The lawyers are all ready." "I know," Corinne said, "but I want to understand why I was the way I was, why I couldn't just be present with you, with her. And I think a therapist could help both of us figure out how to move forward without fighting." He'd agreed, reluctantly, and they started seeing someone the first week of February. It was uncomfortable. It was revealing. It was necessary. "I was drowning," Corinne found herself saying in one session, "and I kept trying to climb on top of everyone around me to stay afloat, instead of just asking for help or admitting that I was struggling." Her ex, Daniel, listened, really listened, And then he said, I didn't know, you wouldn't let me help. I know, Karen said. I'm sorry, I'm still learning how to let people in. By mid-February, Karen and her daughter had started going to lunch together once a week. They didn't talk about heavy things. They talked about her daughter's classes, her friend drama, her college plans. Karen asked questions and listened to the answers. And slowly, imperceptibly, the wall between them began to come down. You're different, her daughter Emma said one afternoon over sandwiches at a place near her school. Like you're still you, but it's like you're less, angry about it. Karen smiled. I had someone teach me that strength doesn't require anger, she said. It took me a while to understand, but I'm getting there. At the gym, Frank had become more than a casual acquaintance. They'd developed an actual friendship. They'd have coffee after workouts sometimes. Frank would ask about her life. Karen would ask about his. They'd talk about books. Frank was a voracious reader, and movies and the kinds of things real friends talk about. One morning in late February, Frank asked her, Have you ever thought about being a trainer? Karen looked at him like he'd suggested she become an astronaut. What? No, why would you suggest that? Because I've watched you over the past 4 months, Frank said. You watch people, you understand form, you understand what motivates people, and most importantly, you understand struggle. You understand what it's like to be lost and angry and using your body as a weapon against yourself. I don't think I'm qualified, Karen said. You'd be more qualified than most people, Frank said. You'd bring actual wisdom instead of just aesthetic. The idea planted itself in Karen's brain and grew slowly, like all the best ideas do. By March, Karen had looked into certification programs. By April, she'd enrolled in her first course. Not because she needed to prove something to the world, but because she wanted to help people find what she'd found, the distinction between strength and control. In the meantime, her relationship with Emma continued to improve. They went to a movie together. Emma told her about a boy she liked and actually accepted her mom's advice. They laughed together about something her dad did. It was small, it was simple, it was everything. One morning in late April, Frank arrived at the gym looking tired in a way Karen had never seen before. Are you okay? She asked immediately. Rebecca called, Frank said, sitting down heavily. My granddaughter was born 3 weeks early, but she's healthy. Margaret Elizabeth Morrison, 8 pounds, 4 ounces. Karen watched Frank's eyes fill with tears, and she understood. This was joy. This was the kind of tears that came from gratitude. That's amazing, Karen said, hugging him. Are you going to see her? Flying out tomorrow, Frank said. I'm going to miss almost 3 weeks of training. Karen smiled. Frank, I think that's okay. Frank laughed. I know it is. I'm just thinking about how Margaret would have loved this. A granddaughter named after her. It feels like the world is saying, yes, she mattered. Yes, she still matters. She does, Karen said. And so do you. And so does being there for that baby and your daughter and your family. I know, Frank said. I've learned that now. It took me 84 years to figure out that nothing, not PRs, not looking impressive, not proving anything, matters compared to just being present with the people you love. After Frank left the gym that day, he decided to skip his workout and just prepare to travel. Karen spent an hour training alone. She moved through her strength work with intention, not because she had to, but because her body was beautiful and strong and deserved to be honored. She thought about the fact that when she'd first met Frank, she'd seen an old man. She'd seen weakness. She'd seen someone past their prime, going through the motions, irrelevant to her world. She'd been so wrong. Frank had been the strongest person in the gym the entire time. When Frank returned 3 weeks later, the first thing he did was show Karen pictures of Margaret Elizabeth Morrison. The baby had dark hair and serious eyes, and she looked like the kind of person who would grow up to change the world, just like her grandmother probably had. She's beautiful, Karen said. How does it feel? Like everything makes sense now, Frank said. I spent 60 years trying to be important in my career and my appearance and my status, and none of that matters. What matters is that I'm here to hold this baby and tell her that her grandmother was the greatest person I ever knew, and that her mother loved me enough to keep me alive after that great person died. He paused. That's the legacy that matters, he said. By May, Karen was officially enrolled in her personal training certification program. She was also officially divorced. The process had been surprisingly amicable once they stopped fighting. Something about counseling and Corinne's willingness to acknowledge her part in their dynamic had shifted the whole tone. She and Daniel still had disagreements about co-parenting, but they were disagreements between adults who respected each other, not battles in a war that didn't end. Emma, noticing the shift, actually seemed more relaxed. She came to one of Corinne's training sessions at the gym and watched her mom work with a client, a middle-aged woman learning to squat for the first time, terrified and brave. "That's cool," Emma said afterward. "You're actually helping people instead of just trying to look impressive." "Yeah," Corinne said. "It turns out that's more satisfying." In June, Corinne passed her certification exam. It wasn't her first gym achievement, but it felt different from the others. It felt purposeful. It felt right. Frank was the first to congratulate her. "I always knew you could do this," he said, "and I'm proud that you're going to help people the way I wish someone had helped me at 30. "I had you," Corinne said. "That was enough." The summer brought a new routine. Corinne still trained in the mornings, but now she also spent afternoons working at the gym as a trainer. She took clients who were struggling, people with anxiety, people dealing with depression, people who'd lost themselves somewhere along the way. She taught them what Frank had taught her, the difference between strength and control, the power of showing up, the magic of being actually present. One of her clients was a woman named Maria, early 50s, angry and scared, and using the gym as a weapon the way Corinne had. Corinne recognized herself in Maria's determined jaw and her aggressive loading and her inability to stop and listen to her own body. One day, Maria loaded 365 pounds, the exact weight that had caused Corinne's injury, and Corinne gently asked her, "Why that weight?" Maria looked at her defensive, "Because I can do it." "Can you?" Corinne asked. Maria tried and failed. The weight collapsed and Corinne had to help her bail out of the squat safely. "That's the place where wisdom comes in," Corinne told her, helping her to the bench. "Knowing what you can do and knowing what you should do are different things." By the end of the summer, Maria had learned to train with intention. She'd also started calling her daughter. And by fall, she and Corinne were friends, supporting each other through the ongoing work of becoming the women they'd always wanted to be. On October 15th, Frank's 85th birthday, the gym, all the people who'd come to know him and care about him over the years, threw him a surprise party. There was a cake. There were speeches. People shared stories about how Frank had motivated them just by being himself. Corinne gave a speech that made Frank cry. "I came to this gym angry," she said. "I was angry at my life, my body, my situation, myself, and I was hostile to a stranger who'd done nothing wrong except exist in the space where I wanted to dominate. He responded with nothing but patience and kindness. He showed me that strength isn't about lifting heavy things. It's about being fully present. It's about honoring what your body can do and accepting what it can't. It's about choosing the people you love over the need to prove something to people who don't matter. Frank, you saved my life by being exactly who you are, and I'm grateful every single day." After the party, Frank took Corinne aside. "I have something for you," he said, pulling out a small box wrapped in blue paper. Inside was a medal, not a fitness competition medal, but something else, a small, elegant piece of jewelry on a delicate chain. On it was engraved, "Strength is a choice." Corinne put it on immediately. "This is for the moment you need to remember that strength looks like letting people in," Frank said. "Like admitting you don't know something, like choosing peace over dominance. You've learned that lesson. But on hard days, when the old patterns come back, I want you to have something to touch that reminds you of who you've chosen to become." Corinne hugged him, and this time she didn't cry. She just felt grateful, fully, deeply grateful. By December, 1 year almost to the day from that first hostile encounter, Corinne had 5 clients. She'd helped a woman deal with postpartum depression through strength training. She'd worked with a man who'd had a heart attack and needed to rebuild trust with his own body. She'd become the kind of trainer that Frank had suggested she could be, someone who understood that the body and the mind were inseparable. That real strength came from honesty and presence. Her relationship with Emma was good, not perfect, but real and warm and honest. Her relationship with Daniel was cordial and functional. And her relationship with herself had transformed entirely. She was still ambitious. She was still driven. But the thing she was driving toward had changed. She was no longer trying to prove she was strong. She was simply trying to be strong in the ways that mattered. In her presence, her honesty, her ability to show up, her willingness to help others find their way. On the morning of December 20th, 1 year and 6 days after that first encounter with Frank, Corinne arrived at the gym at 5:45 a.m. as always. She moved through her warm-up, light stretching, movement work, attention to her body. Frank was there too, as he had been almost every morning for the past year. He was 85 years old, and he moved like someone who'd made peace with his body and his life. When their eyes met across the gym, they didn't nod in the way strangers do. They smiled in the way friends do, in the way two people who have genuinely changed each other do. And Corinne understood, completely and finally, what Frank had been trying to teach her all along. Strength wasn't about winning. It was about choosing to keep showing up. For yourself, for the people you love, for the work of becoming more honest and more kind and more present every single day.